Welcome to Zen Mind Temple tonight. I invite you to journey through ancient wisdom that will both relax your mind and nourish your spirit. Make yourself comfortable. Let your body sink deeper into your bed and allow your breathing to find its natural rhythm. As you settle in, I'll share timeless Zen stories that reveal the hidden purpose behind the connections in our lives. Each tale offers a unique perspective on how we grow through our relationships with others. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine a monastery nestled deep in mist-shrouded mountains. Centuries ago, the air is crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. The only sounds are the distant call of a mountain bird, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the rhythmic swish-swish of a bamboo broom against ancient stone flagstones. An elderly monk, his face a map of serene lines, moves with unhurried grace, sweeping fallen leaves from the courtyard. His movements are not driven by haste or the desire for a perfectly clean space, but by a quiet presence, a simple engagement with the task at hand. Each sweep is an act of mindfulness, a silent conversation with the earth and the season. Into this scene of profound stillness steps a young man. His name was Li, and his journey to the monastery had been long and arduous, fueled by a burning restlessness within his heart. He carried the dust of the world on his robes and the turmoil of countless thoughts in his mind. He had heard tales of the monastery's renowned master, Hui Ming, a sage said to possess the key to inner peace. Li believed that here, far from the clamor of markets and the complexities of human relationships, he could finally scrub his soul clean, find the elusive tranquility he craved. He saw the monastery not just as a refuge, but as a giant cleansing stone, a spiritual laundromat for his weary spirit. He approached the sweeping monk, bowing deeply. "Venerable one," Li began, his voice tight with earnestness, "I seek Master Hui Ming. I have traveled far to find him. My heart, it feels like a dusty mirror, clouded by the grime of the world. I long to polish it clean, to see my true nature reflected clearly once more. Please, where might I find him?" The old monk paused his sweeping, leaning lightly on the bamboo handle. He regarded Li with eyes that held the depth of still water, reflecting the young man's agitation. Without judgment, a faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "The master," he said, his voice as soft as the rustling leaves, "is in the meditation hall. But tell me, young seeker, what dust do you carry that you believe this place alone can wash away?" Li's shoulders slumped slightly. "Oh, venerable one, it is the dust of desire, the grit of disappointment, the clinging soot of regret. I have known anger that burns like hot coals, envy that bites like frost, and sorrow that settles like a thick fog. I have met people who stirred these feelings within me, leaving stains I cannot seem to erase. I thought if I could just come here, away from all that, the stillness would cleanse me." The old monk nodded slowly. He gestured towards a stone bench beneath a gnarled pine tree. "Sit for a moment," he invited. Li sat, the cool stone seeping through his robes. The monk resumed his sweeping, the swish-swish a gentle counterpoint to his words. "You speak of dust on a mirror," he began. "Tell me, where does the dust come from?" "From the world, venerable one," Li replied quickly. "From the people, the situations, the constant friction of life." "And the mirror," the monk continued, his broom tracing a smooth arc, "where is it?" Li touched his chest. "Within, venerable one, the heart-mind, the Buddha nature." "Ah," the monk murmured. "So the dust is external, blown by the winds of circumstance and interaction, and the mirror is internal, unchanging, inherently bright. Is that your understanding?" Li hesitated, sensing a subtle shift in the question. Yes, I believe so. The monk stopped sweeping again, turning fully to face Li. His gaze was gentle but piercing. If the mirror is truly within, inherently bright and unchanging, untouched by the world outside, then tell me, young seeker, how can the dust of the world truly soil it? Li blinked. The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. He had always assumed the dust did soil the mirror, that his inner turmoil was a direct result of external events and people. The monk's question challenged that very foundation. But, Venerable One, Li stammered, the feelings, the anger, the sorrow, they feel real. They cloud my judgment, disturb my peace. Surely they must be clinging to something within? The monk's smile deepened. Feelings arise, like clouds passing across the sky. They are born of perception, of the stories we tell ourselves about the world and the people in it. The anger you feel when someone wrongs you, is the anger in the person who wronged you? Or is it your reaction to the situation, born from your own expectations, your own sense of self? He pointed towards a large, ancient bronze bell hanging nearby. See that bell? If I strike it, he said, picking up a small wooden mallet, and giving the bell a soft tap, dong, it produces a sound. Is the sound in the mallet? Or is it the bell's nature to resonate when struck? The sound comes from the bell, Venerable One, Li answered, following the analogy. Indeed, the monk agreed. The mallet is merely the condition. The capacity to sound is inherent in the bell. Similarly, the capacity for anger, for joy, for sorrow, these are inherent potentials within the mind. External events and people are like the mallet. They strike, and depending on the tuning of your mind, a certain resonance occurs. But the resonance is not imposed upon you from the outside. It arises from you in response. He placed the mallet down. You seek to escape the world, to find a place where no mallets strike, so that your bell remains silent. But is silence the true nature of the bell? Or is its nature to resonate when conditions arise? And can you truly live a life untouched by conditions? Li felt a flicker of understanding, mixed with confusion. But then, how do I find peace? If the mirror is inherently clean, yet I constantly feel clouded. The peace you seek, the monk said softly, is not found by eradicating the dust or silencing the bell. It is found by realizing the nature of the mirror and the nature of the bell. He gestured around the courtyard. Look, dust falls constantly. Leaves drift down. Do I fret over each speck? Do I curse the tree for shedding? No, I sweep. Not because I believe the courtyard can be permanently spotless, but because sweeping is the practice. It is the act of returning, moment by moment, to clarity. He looked directly at Li. Your practice, young seeker, is not to flee the world, or the people who seem to stir your dust. Your practice is to learn the art of inner sweeping. When anger arises because of someone's words, recognize it. Don't blame the words or the speaker. See the anger as a leaf falling onto your inner courtyard. Acknowledge it. Ah, anger is here, and then gently sweep it aside with your awareness. Return to the breath. Return to the present moment. Return to the inherent stillness beneath the temporary storm. But it's so hard, Venerable One, Li whispered, the frustration evident. The feelings feel so strong, so real. They pull me under. They feel strong because you believe them, the monk explained patiently. You identify with them. I am angry. I am hurt. This I that feels attacked, that feels wronged, that is the dust clinging most stubbornly. It is the belief in a separate, fragile self that needs defending, that can be dirtied or broken by the world. When you see that this I is also just a thought, a feeling, a temporary cloud passing over the mirror, then you begin to loosen its grip. He paused, letting the words settle. The mirror itself, he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is untouched. It reflects anger without being angry. It reflects sorrow without being sorrowful. It reflects the dust without being dusty. Your true nature is that mirror, vast, clear, luminous awareness. The dust of thoughts and feelings obscures it only when you mistake the dust for the mirror, when you believe the reflection is the reality. Li sat silently, the old monk's words echoing in the quiet courtyard. The swish-swish of the broom resumed a soothing rhythm. He thought about the people he had left behind, the ones he blamed for his turmoil. He saw how he had clung to his grievances, polishing them like dark jewels, believing they defined him. He saw how his frantic search for external peace was itself a form of agitation. So, Li ventured after a long moment, his voice calmer now, the practice is not to avoid the dust, but to stop identifying with it, to see it as separate from the mirror. The monk nodded. Exactly. To cultivate the witness, to observe the arising and passing of thoughts and feelings without getting swept away by them, to know that the clear space in which they arise is your true home. This knowing is the broom. This awareness is the polish, and it is always available, right here, right now. You don't need to come to a mountain monastery to find it, though the quiet can help you hear its whisper more clearly. He gestured towards the meditation hall. Master Hui Ming can guide you deeper into this practice. He can teach you the techniques of sitting, of breathing, of observing the mind. But remember, his eyes held Li's with gentle intensity. The master cannot polish your mirror for you. He cannot sweep your inner courtyard. He can only point the way. The work, the gentle, persistent work of returning to awareness, of recognizing the inherent purity beneath the dust. That is yours alone. Li took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift slightly, not because his problems had vanished, but because his understanding had shifted. The monastery wasn't a magical cleanser. It was a place to learn how to hold the broom. The people he encountered weren't enemies depositing grime. They were opportunities to practice his sweeping. The peace wasn't a destination to reach by escaping. It was the very ground of his being, momentarily obscured. Thank you, Venerable One, Li said, bowing again, this time with a newfound sense of purpose mixed with humility. I think I understand where to begin. The old monk simply smiled and resumed his sweeping. Swish, swish, swish. The sound was no longer just background noise. To Li, it sounded like the gentle, persistent whisper of awareness itself, sweeping clear the path within. Leaving the serene courtyard and the rhythmic swish-swish of the old monk's broom behind him, Li walked towards the meditation hall, his mind quieter than when he had arrived, yet buzzing with a new kind of energy, the energy of inquiry. The path wound through a small bamboo grove, the tall stalks whispering secrets to the breeze, casting dappled patterns of light and shadow on the mossy ground. The air here felt different, charged with a deep, resonant silence that seemed to just below the threshold of hearing. He could sense the presence of focused minds within the hall ahead, a collective stillness that was almost palpable. As he approached the heavy wooden doors, slightly ajar, he paused. Inside, rows of monks sat in perfect stillness, their backs straight as the bamboo outside, faces serene, utterly absorbed in the inner landscape. At the far end, facing them, sat a figure radiating an aura of profound calm. This, Li knew without being told, was Master Hui Ming. His presence was like a mountain, immovable, ancient, yet alive with a quiet vibrancy. Li hesitated at the threshold, feeling like an intruder upon such sacred silence. He waited, breathing softly, letting the collective tranquility wash over him, feeling his own restless thoughts gradually subside like ripples fading on a still pond. After what felt like an eternity, yet also only a moment, The deep, resonant tone of a gong sounded once boom. Its vibrations seemed to travel through the floorboards and up Li's spine, signaling the end of the sitting period. The monks stirred almost imperceptibly, stretching limbs with quiet grace, their movements fluid and unhurried. Master Hui Ming rose, his eyes sweeping the room with gentle warmth before settling on Li, standing in the doorway. He didn't speak, but his gaze was an invitation. Li stepped forward, bowing deeply. Master Hui Ming, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, still tinged with the reverence of the space. I am Li. I have come seeking freedom. The word felt inadequate even as he said it. Freedom from what? From the turmoil the old monk had spoken of? From the dust? From himself? Master Hui Ming nodded slowly. His eyes, deep pools of knowing, seemed to see right through Li's words to the tangled knot of yearning beneath. Freedom, he echoed, his voice a low, soothing rumble, like distant thunder over calm waters. A precious aspiration. Come. He gestured towards a side door, leading out to a smaller, enclosed garden, lush and green, dominated by a magnificent, ancient wisteria vine. Its gnarled trunk was thick as a man's thigh, twisting upwards like a sleeping dragon, its branches weaving a dense canopy overhead, heavy with cascades of purple flowers. The air was thick with their sweet, almost cloying fragrance. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and blossoms, painting shifting patterns on the stone path below. They walked in silence for a few moments, the only sounds the buzzing of bees drunk on nectar and the soft rustle of leaves. Master Hui Ming stopped beneath the wisteria canopy, looking up. See this vine, Li? He asked. Li looked up. It was undeniably beautiful, a living tapestry of green and purple. Yes, Master. It's magnificent. It is, the Master agreed. But look closer. See how it grows? Li peered. He saw the thick main trunk, and the myriad branches spreading out, some thick and woody, others slender and new. He saw how they twined around each other, around the sturdy wooden trellis, built to support it, and even around themselves. Some branches seemed to loop back, creating knots. Others grew straight for a while, then suddenly twisted into tight spirals. It was a complex, chaotic dance of growth, beautiful yet undeniably entangled. It seems. Very tangled, Master. Li observed, unsure where this was leading. Indeed, Master Hu Ming said, it grows vigorously, reaching for the sun. But in its reaching, it becomes caught in its own growth. It binds itself. He reached out and gently touched a particularly tight knot where two branches had wound around each other so fiercely that the bark was pinched and distorted. This struggle, this self-created entanglement, does it remind you of anything? Li felt a jolt of recognition. The vine's struggle mirrored his own internal state perfectly. His thoughts, his desires, his anxieties, they all seemed to twist and turn, looping back on themselves, creating knots of worry, spirals of regret, tangles of conflicting emotions. He saw his own frantic reaching for peace, for understanding, for freedom, and how that very reaching often seemed to bind him tighter. Master, he said, his voice thick with sudden understanding, it is like my own mind. I reach for clarity, for peace, but my thoughts twist and turn, binding me in confusion and worry. I feel trapped by my own striving. Master Hui Ming nodded, a look of deep compassion in his eyes. Yes, we call these the vines of kleshas, the afflictions, the mental poisons, desire, aversion, ignorance, pride, doubt. They sprout from the fertile soil of our grasping mind. We water them with our attention, our identification, and they grow, Li. They grow vigorously, like this wisteria, reaching for satisfaction, for security, for escape from discomfort. But in their unchecked growth, they inevitably become entangled. They bind us in suffering. He paused, letting Li absorb the image. The sweet scent of the flowers suddenly felt heavy, almost oppressive, mirroring the weight of Li's realization. So many people come here, the master continued softly, seeking to cut these vines, to eradicate desire, to silence thought, to annihilate the ego. They see the entanglement as the enemy, something to be destroyed. He looked directly at Li. Is that what you seek? To cut yourself free? Li thought about it. The idea of simply slicing through the knot of his worries, his fears, his endless mental chatter was incredibly appealing. To be free of it all? Yes, master, he admitted. Wouldn't that be freedom? To be rid of these vines? Master Huining smiled gently, a smile that held both understanding and a hint of something deeper. Come, he said, again, leading Li to a stone bench partially shaded by the vine. They sat. Look at this knot here. He pointed to a complex tangle near them. If I take a knife and cut it, what happens? The branches would be severed, master, Li replied. The knot would be gone. Gone, the master echoed. But what of the life in those branches? What of the sap flowing through them? Cutting severs the connection, but it also kills the potential. It leaves a wound. He paused. More importantly, Li, does cutting one knot prevent new vines from growing? Does it stop the urge to grow, to reach, Li considered? He knew his own mind well enough. Suppressing a thought often made it return stronger. Trying to forcefully banish a feeling usually just buried it deeper where it could fester. No, master, he said slowly. New vines, new worries, new desires. They would probably just grow back. Exactly, Master Hui Ming affirmed. The energy of life, the energy of the mind, is like the sap in this vine. It wants to flow, to grow, to reach towards the light. Trying to cut it off, to suppress it, is like trying to dam a river. The pressure builds and eventually it finds another way, often causing more chaos. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, yet filled with immense power. What if, Lai, the entanglement is not the problem? What if the problem is how we relate to the entanglement? Li frowned, confused. But master, the entanglement is suffering. It binds me, does it? The master challenged softly. Or is it your struggle against the entanglement that binds you? Your belief that it shouldn't be there? Your frantic pulling and twisting to get free? He reached out and gently touched a slender, flexible new shoot near the knot. Look at this young vine. It's not fighting the older branches. It's not trying to untangle the knot. It's simply growing. It finds a space, a gap, and it moves towards the light. It uses the existing structure, the older wood, for support as it reaches upwards. He traced the path of the young shoot. With his finger, it wound loosely around a thicker branch, not constricting it, but using it as a guide, then spiraled upwards towards a patch of sunlight filtering through the canopy. It doesn't see the older vine as an obstacle, Lei. It sees it as part of the landscape, something to be navigated, perhaps even utilized. Its focus isn't on the tangle below. Its focus is on the light above. Li stared at the young shoot, then back at the tight, painful-looking knot. The contrast was stark. One was struggling against itself, creating suffering. The other was flowing with the circumstances, finding a way forward. So, I shouldn't fight my thoughts? My worries? My desires? The idea felt counterintuitive, almost dangerous. Fighting them gives them power, Master Huaming explained. It's like struggling in quicksand. The more you fight, the deeper you sink. Your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, they are not enemies. They are simply energy, movements of the mind, like clouds in the sky of your awareness. They arise due to causes and conditions, past experiences, present stimuli. Trying to cut them off or push them away is like trying to hold back the wind. He placed a hand gently on Li's arm. The practice, young seeker, is not eradication, but transformation. It's learning to be like that young shoot. It's learning to observe the vines, the worries, the cravings, the aversions, without getting caught in their thorns. To see them clearly. Ah, worry is present. Ah, desire is arising. To acknowledge them without judgment, without believing their stories, without identifying with them as me or mine. He pointed back to the knot. When you see the knot clearly, without the frantic urge to cut it or untie it right now, something shifts. You see its structure. You see where it binds tightly, where there might be a little slack. You see it not as a monstrous obstacle, but simply as a knot. And in that space of clear seeing, of non-reactive awareness, intelligence arises. Wisdom whispers, perhaps if I gently ease this loop here, or maybe I can grow around this point, or even this knot is actually providing support for a new direction. Li felt a profound shift within. The image of the struggling vine and the flowing shoot crystallized the old monk's teaching about the inner mirror. The vines were the dust, the passing clouds. His frantic struggle to cut them was the identification, the mistaking of the reflection for reality. The young shoot represented the awareness, the mirror itself, observing without getting entangled, finding a way to grow through the circumstances, not by denying them, but by understanding and utilizing them. The entanglement, Master Hui. Ming concluded, his voice resonating with quiet certainty, is not the barrier to enlightenment, Li. It is the path. Each knot, each twist, each challenging thought or difficult emotion is an opportunity to practice awareness, to cultivate patience, to develop the skillful means of navigating the mind's landscape. The vine's desire to reach the sun is not wrong, it's natural. Your desire for peace, for understanding, is not wrong. It's the very impulse towards awakening. The key is to stop fighting the structure through which that impulse flows. Stop seeing the vines as enemies. See them as the very material of your awakening, the lattice upon which your understanding can climb towards the light. He looked up through the wisteria canopy, where patches of bright blue sky were visible. Freedom isn't found by escaping. The garden, Li, it's found by learning to grow wisely within it, by understanding the nature of the vine, by realizing that the tightest knot, when met with patient, non-judgmental awareness, can become the strongest foothold on your climb towards clarity. He smiled, a warm, encompassing smile. Your worries, your challenges, the people who stir your dust, they are not accidents. They are your wisteria. They are your teachers, offering you the very tangles you need to learn the art of untangling. Or better yet, the art of growing through. Li sat beneath the fragrant, tangled canopy, no longer feeling oppressed by it, but strangely comforted. The sweet scent was still heavy, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt rich, complex, like life itself. He looked at the knotted branches, no longer seeing just obstacles, but seeing potential pathways, lessons waiting to be understood. The buzzing of the bees sounded less like an irritant and more like the hum of diligent work. He took a deep, slow breath, feeling the constriction in his own chest begin to ease. He didn't need to cut himself free. He needed to learn how to grow. The lingering sweetness of the wisteria blossoms and the profound lesson of the tangled vine stayed with Li as he walked away from Master Hui Ming. The master's words echoed, "The entanglement is the path. The knot is the foothold." It was a radical shift, turning his understanding of struggle upside down. Instead of a frantic desire to cut himself free, a new curiosity arose. How could he use the tangles? How could he grow through them? The path he took now led away from the main buildings, winding down a gentle slope towards the sound of rushing water. Tall bamboo groves lined the path, their slender trunks whispering secrets in the breeze, their leaves filtering the afternoon sun into shifting patterns of emerald light on the mossy ground. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying the fresh, mineral scent of flowing water. He followed the sound, the murmur growing into a cheerful babble, then a more insistent rush. Rounding a bend, he found himself at the edge of a clear, fast-flowing mountain stream. Sunlight sparkled on the water as it tumbled over smooth, rounded stones, creating miniature waterfalls and swirling eddies. The sound was invigorating, a constant, lively song that seemed to wash away the last remnants of mental fog. On the opposite bank, partially shaded by overhanging ferns, sat a small, simple wooden hut, smoke curling lazily from a chimney fashioned from a hollowed log. Lee stood for a moment, appreciating the scene's vibrant tranquility. Then his eyes were drawn to movement near the water's edge on his side of the stream. An elderly woman, her back slightly bent, her movements slow but steady, was kneeling on a flat rock. She wore simple, patched robes, her gray hair tied back in a practical bun. In her hands, she held a large, woven bamboo basket. But this basket was unlike any Lee had seen used for carrying water. It wasn't a bucket or a sealed vessel. It was clearly a basket meant for gathering vegetables or firewood, loosely woven, with gaps between the bamboo strips large enough to see through. And crucially, it was old, very old. Several bamboo strips were broken or missing entirely, creating significant holes near the bottom and sides. Lei watched, perplexed, as the old woman carefully dipped this obviously leaky basket into the swift current. She held it submerged for a few seconds, allowing the clear, cold water to rush through it, then slowly lifted it out. Water streamed freely from the numerous gaps and holes, cascading back into the stream long before she could even begin to lift it clear of the surface. By the time she had it fully out, only a few lingering droplets clung to the damp bamboo inside. It held no water at all. She looked at the empty basket for a moment, her expression serene, almost content, then lowered it back into the stream and repeated the action. Dip, hold, lift, water rushing out. Empty basket. Again and again. Lei stared, his mind grappling with the apparent futility of the act. Why would anyone use a basket full of holes to try and carry water? It made no sense. It was the very definition of pointless effort. Was she simple-minded? Was this some strange ritual he didn't understand? The contrast between the profound lesson he'd just received from Master Hui Ming and this seemingly absurd activity was jarring. He felt a familiar flicker of judgment, a mental vine starting to twist. This is foolish. A waste of time. He crossed the stream using stepping stones, the cool water swirling around his ankles, and approached the old woman cautiously. She didn't look up immediately, focused on her rhythmic dipping. When she finally lifted the basket again, empty as always, and saw him standing there, she offered a gentle, gap-toothed smile. Her eyes, though deeply lined, held a remarkable clarity, a calmness that mirrored the old sweeping monk's gaze. "Good day, young man," she said, her voice surprisingly strong and melodious, like the stream itself. "Enjoying the water song?" "Good day, grandmother," Lee replied, bowing slightly. He hesitated, unsure how to voice his confusion without seeming rude. I couldn't help but notice your basket. It seems well used," the old woman chuckled, a warm, rasping sound. "Oh, this old thing? Been with me longer than most of my teeth." She patted the worn bamboo affectionately. Faithful companion. Lee shifted his weight. "Grandmother, forgive my asking, but you are dipping it in the stream? For water?" "I am," she confirmed, dipping it again. Water gushed through the holes. "But it has holes," Lee stated the obvious, unable to contain himself. "Many holes. It cannot hold water." doesn't it? Frustrate you? All this effort, and nothing remains? The old woman lifted the basket, watching the last few drops fall. She looked at Li, her head tilted slightly, her clear eyes holding his with a quiet intensity. Frustrate me? She repeated. Why should it frustrate? Me, young man? What is it you think I'm trying to hold? Li blinked. Water, grandmother. You are dipping the basket in the stream. Surely you are trying to gather water. To carry it back to your hut? He gestured towards the small dwelling across the stream. The old woman smiled again, a smile that seemed to hold the wisdom of the mountains. Ah, she said softly, I see the misunderstanding. You look at the basket, see the holes, see the water escaping, and you assume my purpose is to capture the water, to possess it, to carry it away. She placed the basket down on the rock beside her. But tell me, young man, what happens to the water that flows through the basket? Where does it go? It returns to the stream, grandmother, Li answered, puzzled. Exactly, she said, nodding. It returns to where it belongs. It continues its journey. It hasn't vanished. It hasn't been lost. It has simply passed through. She picked up the basket again, not to dip it, but to hold it up, letting the sunlight filter through its gaps. This basket, she continued, it is not a vessel for holding. It is a vessel for experiencing, for allowing. She stepped closer to the stream's edge. When I dip it, she said, lowering it slowly into the rushing current, I feel the coolness of the water envelop it. I feel the push and pull of the current against my hands. I see the sunlight dancing on the water through the holes. I hear the sound change as the water rushes in and then out. She lifted it, water cascading freely. I watch the droplets catch the light as they fall. I feel the weight of the water while it is present, and then the lightness as it departs. She turned to Li, her eyes shining. The basket, with its holes, allows the water to flow through it. It doesn't trap it. It doesn't try to keep. It experiences the water fully, intimately, in the moment of contact, and then lets it go completely. There is no clinging, no disappointment when it's gone. Only the memory of the coolness, the sound, the shimmering light. Li stood transfixed. The simplicity of her action, which moments ago had seemed the height of futility, now shimmered with profound meaning. He thought of his own life, his own mind. How often had he approached experiences, relationships, even his spiritual quest, like a perfect sealed bucket, dipping into the stream of life, desperately trying to hold on to moments of joy, security, understanding, peace, clinging to pleasant feelings, fearing their end, resisting unpleasant ones, trying to block them out, and the inevitable frustration, the sense of loss, when the water, the feeling, the experience, the state of mind inevitably slipped away or changed. His bucket mind was constantly leaking, causing suffering because he expected it to hold what was inherently fluid, impermanent. The old woman's leaky basket was a masterclass in non-attachment. It didn't resist the nature of water, its fluidity, its impermanence. It embraced it. It allowed the full experience because it didn't try to hold on to it. The holes weren't flaws. They were the very mechanism of its wisdom. They ensured no stagnation, no clinging, only the pure, momentary communion with the stream. Grandmother, Li whispered, awe softening his voice, you are not gathering water. You are. You are gathering the experience of the water. The feeling, the moment, the old woman beamed. Yes, exactly. The basket is my teacher. It reminds me, life flows, joy flows, sorrow flows, thoughts flow, sensations flow. Trying to grasp them, to bottle them up, to make them stay. That is like trying to hold the stream in your hands. It cannot be done, and the struggle to do so only brings pain. She patted the basket. This old basket knows how to be with the water without trying to own it. It receives fully and releases fully. And in that receiving and releasing, there is a deep coolness, a freshness, a clarity. That is the gift. She looked out at the sparkling stream. When you stop trying to capture the water, young man, when you stop expecting your experiences, pleasant or unpleasant, to stay, you begin to truly feel them. You feel the coolness without the fear of it warming. You feel the warmth without the craving for it to last. You feel the sorrow without the belief it will never end. You feel the joy without the desperate clutch to keep it. The holes in your expectations, in your clinging, they are not weaknesses. They are the spaces through which peace can flow. She dipped the basket one more time, holding it steady in the current. "Come," she said, gesturing for Lee to step closer. "Try it. Feel the water flow through. Don't try to catch it. Just feel its presence, its movement, its life. And then feel it go." Lee knelt beside her on the smooth rock. The cool spray from the stream misted his face. He took the worn bamboo basket from her hands. It felt surprisingly light, yet sturdy. He lowered it into the rushing water. The cold shock against his hands was immediate and bracing. He felt the powerful tug of the current against the basket, vibrating up his arms. He saw the clear water rushing in, swirling around inside the loose weave, catching the sunlight in 1,000 fleeting sparkles, then immediately streaming out through the gaps, rejoining the flow downstream. He felt the weight of the water, filling it momentarily, a solid, cool presence, and then the lightness as it emptied, the basket becoming buoyant again. He lifted it out, watching the last rivulets trace paths down the bamboo and drip back into the stream. His hands were wet, cool. The basket was empty, but he didn't feel disappointment. He felt refreshed, cleansed. There was a strange sense of completeness in the act itself, independent of any result. He hadn't gotten anything tangible, yet he felt he had received something invaluable. A moment of pure presence, a direct experience of flow, of impermanence, of participation without possession. He looked at the old woman. She nodded, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The coolness remains, doesn't it?" she said softly. "Not in the basket, in your hands, in your awareness. That is the true gathering. That is the Qing Liang, the pure, clear coolness, found not in holding, but in letting flow." Lee looked down at the empty basket, then at his wet hands, then out at the endlessly flowing stream. The frantic need to grasp, to achieve, to hold on to states of mind or experiences began to loosen its grip. Like water through bamboo, a new understanding seeped in. Sometimes, the deepest refreshment comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we allow to pass through us, leaving only the pure, cool sensation of having been fully present, fully permeable, fully alive in the fleeting moment. The holes weren't the problem. They were the path to the coolness within. The memory of the cool stream water rushing through the leaky basket lingered on Lee's skin and in his mind as he made his way back towards the monastery's heart. The pure, clear sensation the Qing Liang, the old woman, had spoken of, felt like a gentle balm. It wasn't a possession, but a state of openness, a permeability that allowed experience to flow without leaving the residue of clinging. The path led him up a flight of moss-covered stone steps towards a simple tea house perched on a higher terrace, overlooking the valley below. Soft wisps of cloud drifted like silk scars between the distant peaks, painted gold by the lowering sun. The air here carried the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke and dried tea leaves. As Lee reached the open doorway of the tea house, he saw Master Hui Ming seated on a low cushion beside a warm wooden table. The master's posture was relaxed, yet attentive, his gaze soft as he observed the valley. On the table sat a modest, unglazed clay teapot, steam curling from its spout, and two small, handleless cups made of the same humble earth. The cups were empty. Lai bowed silently and entered. Master Hui Ming looked up, his eyes reflecting the golden light. "Ah, Li," he greeted, his voice a warm rumble in the quiet space. "You carry the freshness of the stream. Come, share a cup of tea with me. The evening brew is ready." Grateful for the invitation, Li sat on a cushion opposite the master. He watched as Hui Ming carefully poured the steaming amber liquid into the two cups. The fragrance that rose was earthy and complex, notes of pine and stone and something subtly floral filling the space between them. The master gestured to Li's cup. "Please," he said, a small, encouraging smile touching his lips. "The tea is best enjoyed warm." Li reached for the cup. The clay was rough and warm against his fingers. He lifted it towards his lips, eager to taste the tea Master Hui Ming had prepared. But before he could take a sip, the master spoke again, his tone light yet carrying an undercurrent of inquiry. "Li," he said, his eyes fixed on the young man, "before you drink, tell me, what teachings have you gathered on your journey so far? What pearls of wisdom have you found?" Li paused, the cup warm in his hands. The question resonated. After the sweeping courtyard and the tangled vine and the flowing stream, he felt full of new insights. Eagerly, wanting to show his progress, he began to recount what he'd learned. He spoke of the inner mirror, inherently clean, and how the dust of emotion was merely a passing cloud. He described the vines of affliction, how they weren't enemies to be destroyed, but materials for growth, to be navigated with awareness. He recounted the lesson of the leaky basket, the profound understanding of non-attachment, of experiencing the moment fully without clutching at it. His words flowed, animated by his enthusiasm, his cup of fragrant tea momentarily forgotten He mentally catalogued his newfound wisdom. He spoke for several minutes, outlining the principles he had absorbed. He felt pleased, almost proud of how far he'd come in such a short time. Finally, he paused, taking a breath. "So, Master," he concluded, a note of accomplishment in his voice, "I am learning to see clearly, to navigate without grasping, to let things flow." Master Hui Ming listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When Li finished, the master simply nodded. Then, without a word, he reached for the clay teapot. Li, assuming the master was refilling his own cup, brought his own cup closer to his lips, finally ready to take that long-awaited sip. But Hui Ming didn't pour into his own cup. He moved the teapot over Li's cup, which was still full, and he began to pour. The steaming tea cascaded down, filling the small cup in an instant. But Hui Ming didn't stop. He kept pouring. The hot liquid overflowed the brim, spilling onto the table, spreading rapidly towards the edge, threatening to drip onto Li's robes. "Master!" Li exclaimed, startled, jerking his hand away to avoid the scalding tea. "It's full. It's overflowing." Hui Ming continued pouring for a second longer, the steady stream a stark counterpoint to Li's exclamation, then calmly set the teapot down. He looked at Li, his gaze steady and clear. "Yes, Li," he said simply. "It is full." He gestured to the spilled tea pooling on the worn wood. How can more tea enter a cup that is already brimming over? The action, so unexpected and direct, cut through Li's mental exposition like a knife. He looked down at his cup, still steaming, but surrounded by the spilled tea. The message was immediate and visceral. He had been so busy recounting his accumulated knowledge, so eager to demonstrate his understanding, that he had literally left no space to receive anything new. His mind, like the cup, had been full to the brim, full of the very concepts he had just learned, full of the pride of acquisition. He had been ready to drink his own conclusions, not the fresh tea Master Hui Ming was offering. You hold your understanding tightly, the master continued, his voice gentle now, smoothing the rough edges of the lesson. You have gathered valuable insights, Li. The mirror, the vines, the flowing water, these are profound truths. But like tea left in a cup too long, concepts can grow cold, stale, rigid. They can harden into beliefs. And beliefs, he tapped the spilled tea with a fingertip, leave no room for the fresh infusion of this moment, this experience, this direct taste of reality. He leaned forward slightly, his presence encompassing Lei. The mind that is full of I know, he said softly, is like that overflowing cup. It cannot receive. It cannot truly listen because it is busy comparing what it hears to what it already holds. It cannot truly see because it filters everything through the lens of acquired knowledge. It cannot truly experience because it is already labeling and categorizing. It mistakes the map for the territory, the description of, the tea for the taste itself. Li felt the flush of embarrassment rise in his cheeks, mingled with a dawning humility. His eagerness to demonstrate his learning had blocked the simple act of sharing tea. His mind, stuffed with newly acquired concepts about non-attachment and presence, had itself become attached to those concepts, preventing him from being present. He recalled the leaky basket, its emptiness, its permeability. His own mind had become impermeable, sealed by his own knowing. Master, Li said, his voice low, staring at the spilled tea soaking into the wood grain. I was clinging to my lessons. I wasn't ready to taste. Hui Ming nodded. A common journey. We collect insights like precious stones, forgetting that their value lies not in the hoarding, but in their ability to illuminate the path ahead. To be truly receptive, to allow genuine understanding to deepen, requires... He paused, lifting his own empty cup. Emptiness. He tilted his cup slightly, letting Li see its clean, dry interior. Like this cup before tea is poured. Open, available, free of preconceptions. It doesn't grasp for the tea, nor does it resist it. It simply is ready to receive. It doesn't know what the tea will taste like. It doesn't need to know. It simply accepts the infusion. He poured a small measure of tea into his own cup. The amber liquid filled it, reflecting the light. The practice of emptiness, Hui Ming continued, watching the steam rise, is not about becoming devoid of knowledge or experience. It is about loosening the grip on what we think we know. It is about cultivating a mind that is spacious, flexible, curious, like the bamboo bending in the wind, not rigid like stone. It is about approaching each moment, each teaching, each person, as if for the very first time, with a beginner's mind, open, questioning, receptive. He lifted his cup and took a slow, savoring sip. Ah, he exhaled, the sound one of pure appreciation. When the cup is empty, the tea reveals its true flavor. When the mind is open, life reveals its true depth. He then reached across and gently took Li's still full, now lukewarm cup. Without ceremony, he poured its contents onto the earth floor beside the tea house. He held out the empty cup to Li. Now, he said, his eyes holding Li's with profound kindness, begin. Again. With this empty cup, forget what you have learned about the tea. Forget what you think you know. Just drink. Li took the cup, the clay warm from his earlier grip. The steam had ceased. The tea was merely warm. But holding the empty vessel, he felt a profound shift. All the theories, the insights, the mental baggage, it felt less like a possession now, and more like something he could momentarily set aside. He wasn't renouncing his learning. He was making space to experience beyond it. Master Hui Ming poured fresh tea from the pot. The stream glowed amber in the fading light. As Li watched the cup fill again, he didn't mentally label the experience. He didn't compare it to the leaky basket or the knotted vine. He simply saw the liquid rising. He smelled the reinvigorated fragrance, pine, earth, warmth. He felt the heat radiating from the clay. He lifted the cup to his lips. He paused, inhaling the aroma deeply. Then he took a sip. The taste spread across his tongue, earthy, slightly astringent, then subtly sweet. There were nuances he hadn't noticed before, depths he couldn't articulate. He wasn't thinking about the tea. He was simply tasting it. The experience was direct, unmediated by concepts. Warmth spread through his chest, a gentle infusion of presence. He lowered the cup, looking at Master Hui Ming. There were no words needed. The understanding was in the space between them, in the warmth of the tea, in the quiet acceptance of the cooling air of evening. The mind that could let go of its own fullness, even the fullness of spiritual knowledge, could finally begin to truly drink from the endless stream of being. The cup, now holding tea, was somehow more spacious than when it was empty. Emptiness, he realized, wasn't lack. It was the boundless capacity to receive. The taste of the tea, savored in the quiet space, Master Hui Ming's lesson on emptiness had opened within him, lingered on Li's tongue, and in his mind like a subtle fragrance. That simple, direct tasting, unclouded by the overstuffed cup of his prior knowledge, had felt like a new kind of breathing, lighter, freer. He left the tea house terrace as the sun dipped below the peaks, painting the sky in hues of amethyst and saffron. The monastery was settling into the deeper quiet of evening. The distant clang of a bell, calling monks to rest, echoed softly across the valley, a final punctuation before the profound silence of mountain night. Lai found himself drawn towards the monks' quarters, small, simple huts nestled amidst bamboo and pine. The air was cool and fragrant, with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. He planned to meditate before sleep, allowing the day's profound teachings to settle within the empty space he was learning to cultivate. He entered his small, assigned hut, sparse and clean, containing only a thin sleeping mat, a small oil lamp, and a low wooden stool. He lit the lamp, its small warm flame casting flickering shadows on the woven bamboo walls. The scent of burning oil mingled with the mountain air drifting through the open window. He sat on the mat, arranging his legs into a comfortable position, preparing to close his eyes and turn inward. But as he attempted to quiet his mind, a familiar turbulence stirred. The events of the day replayed, the old monks sweeping, and the mirror's inherent purity, Master Hui Ming beneath the tangled wisteria vines, the old woman and the flowing stream, the spilled teacup, and beneath the surface of these reflections, deeper currents began to swirl. He thought of people he had encountered before his journey, the merchant who had cheated him, leaving a sting of anger, the friend whose success had sparked a twinge of envy, the family member whose critical words still echoed with a residue of hurt. And within himself, conflicting impulses arose. Moments of kindness he remembered with warmth, alongside flashes of selfishness he recalled with shame. A sense of gratitude for the monastery's peace coexisted with a nagging restlessness. He felt like a field hosting a silent war dot as he struggled to focus on his breath. The image surfaced in his mind's eye, not born of this day's lessons, but an echo from childhood, a story his grandfather had told him long ago, the story of the two wolves. He saw them clearly. One wolf, strong, powerful, its coat shimmering like moonlight, radiating calmness, courage, generosity, compassion, and a deep sense of connection. The other wolf, equally strong, its eyes sharp and hungry, emanating fear, envy, greed, resentment, anger, and the chilling isolation born of superiority. They circled each other within his heart, locked in a silent, eternal struggle. snarls silent within the quiet hut. Which wolf wins? Grandfather had asked the young Li, leaning forward, his eyes twinkling. Li remembered his answer, given with childish certainty. The one I feed. Now, sitting alone in the flickering lamplight, the question held immense weight, far beyond the simplicity of a fireside tale. He wasn't just feeding them scraps. He felt like the battleground. The agitation he felt wasn't caused by the external memories, he realized, but by the wolves within those memories were awakening. The resentment wolf snarling at the cheating merchant, the envy wolf pacing at his friend's success, the pride wolf flinching from past criticism. Just as this internal battle threatened to consume his meditation, a soft knock sounded at his flimsy bamboo door. Li opened his eyes, startled. Who would seek him at this hour? He rose, the image of the wolves fading, but the feeling of conflict lingering. Opening the door, he saw a young monk, perhaps a year or two older than himself, holding two large, empty wooden water buckets hanging from a shoulder yoke. His face was open and earnest, illuminated by the moon now rising above the pines. Behind him, the courtyard path shimmered silver gray. "Brother Li?" the young monk asked, his voice quiet in the night air. "Forgive the intrusion. I am Ming on the night watch." One of the elders felt thirsty. "Our cistern near the dormitory is low. Would you be willing to assist me?" Carrying water from the spring in the moonlight offers its own quiet contemplation. Li hesitated for a split second. Part of him, the wolf yearning for solitude, wanting to wrestle with his own turmoil, wanted to decline. But another part, perhaps the one touched by the old woman's lesson on presence, or the master's reminder of emptiness, felt the gentle pull of simple, shared action. "Of course, Brother Ming," he said, stepping out into the cool night. Ming handed him one of the buckets and the end of the yoke. The wood was smooth and cool against his shoulder. They walked in companionable silence, along a moonlit path that wound towards the higher spring Li had encountered earlier. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the chorus of crickets, the sighing of pines in the night breeze, and the rhythmic crunch of their sandals on the gravel path. The moon, nearly full, cast everything in sharp silver and deep shadow. Li felt the inner conflict gradually soften, replaced by the tangible sensations of the night, the cool air on his skin, the slight weight of the bucket bumping gently against his thigh, the luminous beauty of the landscape painted by moonlight dot. After several minutes of quiet walking, Ming spoke, his voice calm and thoughtful, as if continuing an inner conversation Li couldn't hear. "I always found it fascinating, Brother Li," he began, "how differently we carry our burdens. This yoke distributes the weight between us, making the path lighter. But other burdens we feel we must carry alone." Li considered this. His own inner wolves felt like a solitary burden, heavy and hidden. "What burdens do you speak of, Brother Ming?" he asked, genuinely curious about the monk's night walk reflections. Ming was silent for a few more steps, the only sound the creak of the yoke and their footsteps. "The struggle within," he said finally. "The ancient one, the two wolves." Li almost stumbled. The echo of his own recent thought was uncanny. "The two wolves?" he echoed, keeping his voice even. "Yes," Ming confirmed. "The tale of the opposing natures fighting within every heart, one leaning towards light, connection, peace, the other towards shadow, separation, turmoil." He paused, shifting the yoke slightly. "Most people," he continued, "believe the struggle is between them. One must win, the other must lose. We are taught to hate the shadow wolf, starve it, try to drive it out with force. Its mere presence feels like failure." Ming's voice held no judgment, just observation. Li thought of his agitation before Ming knocked. That's precisely how he'd felt, tormented by the presence of his own shadow wolf, viewing it as a dangerous, shameful intruder. Isn't that so? Li asked. The shadow one is destructive. It causes harm. It can, Ming acknowledged. But tell me, Brother Li, have you ever truly looked at that shadow wolf? Or do you only ever see its snapping jaws and hear its growls? They had reached the spring. Moonlight transformed the flowing water into liquid mercury, tumbling and sparkling over smooth stones. The air hummed with the sound and the deep coolness radiating from the pool. Ming set his bucket down and Li followed suit, rubbing his shoulder where the yoke had pressed. Ming knelt by the water's edge, scooping clear, cold water with a gourd, dipper hanging nearby and filling his bucket slowly. Li knelt beside him, doing the same, the coldness shocking his hands pleasantly. It is easy, Ming said, his voice soft against the water's sound, to demonize the shadow wolf, to see only its aggression, its fear, its hunger. But what fuels that aggression? Often, it is a deep fear of being hurt, of being insignificant. What fuels the greed? Often, a profound sense of lack, a desperate belief that there isn't enough. The resentment? It springs from wounds that haven't healed. He poured another dipperful into the bucket. This wolf, it isn't inherently evil. It is wounded. It is misunderstood. It acts out from pain. Li listened, dipping his gourd into the icy spring. He thought of his own shadow impulses. The sharp retorts spoken in anger, rooted in feeling unseen. The envy, born of a sense of inadequacy. The pride, shielding deep vulnerability. Ming's words reframed them not as monstrous enemies, but as parts of himself, crying out in pain. So, we should pity it? Li asked, confused. Feed it kindness? Not pity, Ming corrected gently, filling his bucket to the brim. Compassion and understanding. But feeding it doesn't mean giving it free rein to destroy. He stood, lifting his full bucket. Li finished filling his own and stood as well. Ming settled the yoke across his shoulders, Li lifting his end. The weight was significant now. Cool water sloshing gently within the wood. The teaching isn't just about which wolf wins, Ming said as they began the slow walk back, the buckets heavy but manageable. It's about realizing we are the entire field. Both wolves live within us. They are both expressions of our life force, our energy. The light wolf holds the potential for wisdom, peace, and connection. The shadow wolf holds the energy for survival, protection, and the raw power needed to act. He adjusted the yoke. The true art lies not in annihilation, but in integration, in understanding their nature, in recognizing the shadow wolf's pain and unmet needs, and meeting them with the light wolf's wisdom and compassion. It is the light wolf that can soothe the shadow wolf's fear, address its sense of lack, heal its wounds. Li felt the coolness of the water seep through the wood against his thigh. He thought of his earlier internal war. Trying to destroy his anger or envy only made it stronger, more snarled. But what if, when those feelings arose, those snarling, shadowy forms? He paused. What if, instead of wrestling them down in shame, he turned towards them, not with hatred, but with the light wolf's gentle curiosity? Ah, anger is here. What pain is it protecting? What need isn't being met? What if he offered that wounded, part understanding, a sense of safety, channeling its raw energy towards constructive awareness instead of destructive reaction? When the shadow wolf is seen, Ming continued, his breath slightly labored under the weight, but his voice steady, understood, and its essential needs met with compassion. Something transforms. Its chaotic energy doesn't disappear. It becomes available. The fierce protection can become wise discernment. The anger, rightly channeled, can become the courage to speak truth or set boundaries. The hunger can motivate growth, not hoarding. It learns to guard the light wolf's wisdom, not undermine it. He glanced at Li in the moonlight, his eyes reflecting the silver orb above. And the light wolf? It grows stronger, clearer, not by denying the shadow, but by embracing it with awareness. The field becomes whole. The inner war ceases. They reached the dormitory area. Ming lowered the yoke. The bucket settled with a soft thud. Li felt the release of the weight, both physical and metaphorical. He hadn't eliminated his inner wolves, but in the quiet contemplation born of shared labor under the moon, Ming had illuminated a new way to relate to them. He stood for a moment, looking at the full buckets of cool spring water. They held not just water, but the reflection of the moon, the night sky. He thought of his own heart-mind, now seen not as a battleground, but as a vast field capable of holding both light and shadow, when met with understanding and compassion. The wolves weren't enemies fighting to the death. They were aspects of his own wholeness, yearning for reconciliation. "Thank you, Brother Ming," Li said, his voice filled with a quiet resonance. "Your night walk has watered more than just the sister." Ming smiled, a gentle curve in the moonlight. "Rest well, Brother Li. Remember, both wolves sleep within your field. Tend it gently." He picked up one bucket to take to the elder, leaving Lai standing by the other full vessel. The moonlight painted the water's surface silver, a perfect circle reflecting the vast, serene night sky. Li reached down and touched the cool water. It wasn't about choosing which wolf to feed. It was about cultivating the wisdom to nourish the entire field with awareness. The war could end, not in victory for one, but in peace for the whole. The cool water Li had carried under the moon, reflecting the vast silver disk above, seemed to have settled something within him. The understanding that his inner field could hold both light and shadow, tended with compassion, brought a newfound quietude. The frantic internal battle subsided, replaced by a watchful, spacious awareness. He woke the next morning feeling rested, the mountain air crisp and invigorating as he stepped out of his hut. The scent of pine resin and damp earth was strong, mingling with the distant aroma of incense drifting from the main hall. Sunlight, still low and golden, streamed through the bamboo groves, painting long, shifting stripes of light and shadow on the dew-kissed path. He decided to spend the morning in quiet reflection near the stream where he'd met the old woman. The sound of rushing water felt like a constant cleansing companion. As he approached the familiar spot, however, he found the scene unexpectedly animated. Near the water's edge, a small group of young novices, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, were gathered in a tight, excited cluster. Their shaved heads gleamed in the sun, their simple robes fluttering as they gestured animatedly. Their voices, high-pitched and earnest, rose above the stream's murmur, filled with passionate conviction. Li paused, curious. What could be causing such fervent discussion among the youngest monks? He moved closer, staying partially hidden by a large, moss-covered boulder to observe without disturbing them. He saw they were gathered around something large and gray, partially obscured by their small bodies. As he shifted his position, he caught sight of it, a magnificent, though elderly, temple elephant. The beast stood patiently, its massive head lowered, its trunk occasionally curling to touch the ground or explore the air. Its skin was deeply wrinkled, like ancient leather, and its eyes held a profound, weary wisdom. It belonged to the monastery. Li knew, used occasionally for ceremonial purposes or light labor, a gentle giant respected by all, but the novices weren't focused on the elephant as a whole. Each child seemed fixated on a different part of the immense creature, touching it, examining it closely, and arguing vehemently with their peers. "This," declared one boy, his hand firmly planted on the elephant's thick, pillar-like leg, "is clearly the most important part. It's solid, it's strong, it holds everything up. Without legs, the elephant couldn't stand, it couldn't walk." It's the foundation. Nonsense, retorted another, standing near the elephant's side, his small hand patting the rough. Wrinkled hide, you're missing the whole picture. This is what defines the elephant. It's vast. It's like a wall. It protects everything inside. The skin is the boundary, the container. Without skin, there's no shape. A third novice, standing near the front, had both hands wrapped around the tip of the elephant's trunk as it gently explored the ground near his feet. You're both wrong, he insisted, his voice shrill with conviction. Look at this. It moves. It's flexible. It picks things up. It touches the world. How can you say legs or skin are more important than the trunk? It's how the elephant interacts. It's vital. A fourth boy, shorter than the others, was crouched near the elephant's tail, gingerly holding the coarse, tufted end. But what about this? He piped up, waving the tail slightly, causing the elephant to flick it gently in response. It swats flies. It signals. It's small, but it's crucial. You can't ignore the tail. The arguments grew louder, each boy clinging fiercely to his perception, convinced that the part he was experiencing was the definitive truth of the elephant. They pointed, they poked, they raised their voices, their faces flushed with the certainty of their limited perspective. The elephant itself remained remarkably patient, its deep eyes observing the children with a kind of detached, ancient calm, occasionally rumbling softly deep in its chest. A sound like distant thunder dot, Lee watched, a wry smile touching his lips. The scene was a perfect, living illustration of a parable he'd heard long ago, the blind men and the elephant. Here were the blind men, each holding on to a fragment, mistaking it for the whole, arguing passionately from their limited vantage point. He saw the frustration, the inability to see beyond their own immediate experience, the conviction that their partial truth was the absolute reality. Just as the debate seemed poised to escalate further, a calm, resonant voice cut through the chatter. Children. Master Hui Ming stood a few paces away, having approached silently. His presence was like a stone dropped into a turbulent pond. The ripples of argument instantly stilled. The novices turned, their expressions shifting from passionate certainty to respectful attention, though traces of their convictions still lingered in their eyes. Master Hui Ming walked slowly towards them, his gaze sweeping over the group and the patient elephant. You seem to have discovered something remarkable, he observed, his voice gentle, yet carrying effortlessly. Tell me, what is it you have found? The boy holding the legs spoke first, eager to claim his truth. Master, we found an elephant. But it's really all about the legs. They are the strength. No, Master, countered the boy by the side. It's the skin. It's the vastness, the trunk, the tail. The others chimed in almost simultaneously. Master Hui Ming listened, nodding slowly as each boy presented his case. He didn't dismiss any of them. Instead, he walked around the elephant, his hand lightly brushing the wrinkled skin near its shoulder, then moving to feel the solid curve of its tusk, the softness of its large ear, the coarse hair of its tail. He took his time, experiencing each part with quiet attention. Finally, he stopped before the group. Each of you, he began, his voice soft but penetrating, has described what you experienced with great honesty. The leg is strong, like a pillar. The skin is vast and protective, like a wall. The trunk is flexible and sensitive, like a living tool. The tail is useful for swatting flies and signaling. He paused, letting his words settle. And each of you is absolutely correct. About the part you touched, the boys looked at each other, confused. They had expected the master to declare a winner, to tell them who was right. Instead, he seemed to be saying they were all right, which felt impossible, given their conflicting descriptions. But Master, the leg boy protested, he said the skin is the most important, but without legs. And without skin, Master Hu Ming interjected gently, the legs would have no form, no protection. Without the trunk, how would it drink or gather food? Without the tail, how would it manage the flies that bother its vast skin? He looked at each boy in turn. You each described a true aspect of the elephant, but you described it as if it were the whole elephant. And in doing so, you argued, convinced that your piece of the truth was the entire picture. He gestured towards the magnificent creature standing patiently amidst them. The elephant, he said, his voice filled with quiet reverence, is not just the leg. It is not just the skin, or the trunk, or the tail. It is the leg and the skin and the trunk and the tail and the tusks and the ears and the eyes and the deep, rumbling breath and the ancient wisdom in its gaze. It is the totality of these parts, functioning together, inseparable, that makes the elephant what it is. He let his gaze rest on the boys, who were now listening intently, their earlier certainty replaced by dawning comprehension. This, Master, Hui Ming continued, is a profound lesson about how we perceive the world, and especially how we perceive each other. We are all, in a way, like these novices. We encounter a person, a friend, a stranger, even an enemy, and we touch only a part of them. We see an action, hear a word, experience a single interaction. And from that fragment, we often construct an entire story about who they are. We label them: kind, cruel, generous, selfish, wise, foolish. He stepped closer to the elephant, placing his palm flat against its side, feeling the slow, powerful rhythm of its breathing. But a person is not a single action, or a single word, or a single moment. They are vast, complex, ever-changing beings, just like this elephant. They have strengths and weaknesses, joys and sorrows, moments of clarity and moments of confusion. They have histories that shape them, fears that drive them, hopes that inspire them. To define someone solely by the fragment we experience is like defining this magnificent creature solely by its tail. Li, listening from behind the boulder, felt the truth of the Master's words resonate deep within. He thought of the people who had caused him pain. How often had he defined them entirely by the hurt they inflicted, ignoring the vast, unknown landscape of their own struggles, their own wounds, their own moments of kindness or regret. He thought of himself, too, how easy it was to label himself based on a single failing or a single success, forgetting the complex tapestry of his own being. The person who enjay you, Master Hui Ming said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying clearly in the quiet space by the stream, is not only anger. They are also someone who may love deeply, who may fear greatly, who may carry burdens you cannot see. The person who helps you is not only kindness. They too have flaws, doubts, and moments of selfishness. To see only the fragment is to remain blind to the whole being. He turned back to the novices. When you encounter others, remember the elephant. Remember that what you see, what you experience, is only a part. Cultivate curiosity instead of certainty. Ask what else is true about this person? What might lie beneath the surface? What vastness might I be missing? This doesn't mean ignoring harmful actions or excusing cruelty. It means understanding arises from seeing more, not less. Compassion blossoms when we recognize the whole being, not just the fragment that brushes against our lives. The novices stood silent now, their earlier arguments forgotten. They looked at the elephant with new eyes, not as a collection of separate parts to be debated, but as a single, majestic whole. One boy tentatively reached out and touched the leg, and glanced towards the trunk. Another looked from the skin to the tail. The elephant shifted its weight, a low rumble vibrating through the ground, a sound of immense, patient presence. Master Hui Ming smiled. The world is full of elephants, he said softly. People, situations, even our own selves. Vast, complex, multifaceted. When we stop clinging to our small fragment of the truth, when we open our inner eyes to the possibility of the whole, the arguments cease. Understanding deepens. And connection, he placed a hand gently on the nearest novice's shoulder, becomes possible. Lee stepped out from behind the boulder, drawn by the quiet power of the lesson. The novices saw him and bowed slightly. Master Hui Ming met his gaze, a knowing look in his eyes. Lee looked at the elephant, then at the boys, then back at the master. He understood now why the people in his life weren't accidents. Each one, even those who caused friction, was an opportunity to touch a different part of the vast elephant of human experience, challenging him to see beyond his own limited perspective, to glimpse the wholeness that connected them all. The stream murmured its agreement, a constant reminder that reality, like water, flows beyond any single container, any single point of view. The image of the patient elephant and the fervent novices, each clinging fiercely to their fragment of the truth, stayed with Lai long after he left the stream. Master Hui Ming's words echoed, "To see only the fragment is to remain blind to the whole being." It was a humbling reminder, urging him to look beyond the surface of his own judgments and the snapshots he held of others. The lesson felt expansive, opening a door to a deeper understanding of connection. Yet, as the days passed within the monastery's embrace, Lee felt a subtle shift within himself. The initial fervor of seeking, the desperate hunger for answers that had driven him up the mountain path, began to soften. The profound teachings he'd received weren't forgotten, but they settled within him, becoming less like bright, newly acquired jewels and more like the bedrock beneath his feet. A quiet confidence, born of direct experience and reflection, began to replace the anxious seeking. One crisp morning, as dawn painted the eastern sky in streaks of rose and gold, Lee felt an inner nudge. It wasn't a dramatic calling, but a gentle, persistent sense that it was time. Time to leave the sanctuary of the monastery and return to the world below, carrying the stillness he had cultivated like a lantern within his chest. He sought out Master Hui Ming, finding him in the meditation hall, sitting in the pre-dawn hush. The master opened his eyes as Lee approached, a knowing look in their depths, as if he had been expecting him. "Master," Lee said, bowing deeply, "the peace I have found here, it feels like a seed taking root within me. I feel ready to return to the river of life below, to see the elephants whole, to tend my inner field with compassion. I wish to take my leave, with gratitude for your guidance." Master Hui Ming studied him for a long moment, the silence filled only by the distant crowing of a rooster. Then, a slow, warm smile spread across his face. "The seed needs the open sky and the wide earth to grow into its full stature, Lee." He sighed, his voice resonant in the quiet hall. "The monastery is a greenhouse, nurturing the sprout, but the true forest awaits. Go with the blessings of this mountain. Remember the mirror, the vines, the flowing water, the empty cup, the field, and the whole elephant. Carry them not as burdens, but as lights." Lee bowed again, emotion tightening his throat. He packed his few belongings, simple robes, a water gourd, a small bag of rice, feeling lighter than when he had arrived, despite the weight of wisdom he carried. He offered silent thanks to the sweeping monk, the old woman by the stream, Brother Meng, and all the unseen presences that had shaped his time on the mountain. Then, as the first true rays of sunlight gilded the monastery roofs, he walked through the main gate, leaving the scent of incense and pine behind. The descent was different from the ascent. His steps were sure, his breath easier. He noticed the beauty of the path, the intricate patterns of ferns unfurling, the glint of dew on spiderwebs, the chorus of birdsong, without the frantic need to arrive. He carried the mountain's stillness within him. By late afternoon, he reached the foothills, the air growing warmer, carrying the familiar sense of earth, crops, and distant wood smoke. Soon, the path joined a wider track, leading towards a bustling river town he remembered passing through weeks before dawn as he approached the outskirts. The sound of the river grew louder, a deeper, broader sound than the mountain stream. He followed the sound, drawn towards the water, a natural landmark before entering the town's busy streets. He emerged onto a wide, muddy bank bustling with activity. Fishermen mended nets, women washed clothes, children splashed in the shallows, and travelers gathered, waiting to cross the wide, brown expanse of the river. On the opposite bank, Lee could see the clustered buildings of the town, smoke rising from chimneys, the sounds of commerce faintly audible. Near a rickety wooden jetty stood a small, weathered hut. Outside it sat an old man, his skin like sun-baked leather, his eyes narrowed against the glare reflecting off the water. He was meticulously repairing a large, worn fishing net spread across his lap. Beside him, tied to a post, bobbed a simple, sturdy-looking wooden boat. This, Lee assumed, was the ferryman. Lee approached, bowing respectfully. "Honored ferryman," he greeted. "I seek passage across the river to the town." The old man didn't look up immediately, his gnarled fingers working a knot with surprising dexterity. Finally, he raised his head, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Passage costs a coin," he stated simply, his voice rough like river stones. Lee nodded, reaching into his small pouch. He pulled out one of the few copper coins he possessed, earned from helping with chores at the monastery. He held it out. The ferryman glanced at it, then back at Lee's face, then down at his feet. Lee followed his gaze and saw, leaning against the hut wall, an old, patched, and visibly waterlogged bamboo raft. It looked ancient, some bindings frayed, a few bamboo poles cracked. "That raft," the ferryman said, nodding towards it, "belonged to a traveler like you, some days back. Paid his coin, crossed the river, left it behind, said he had no further use for it." He spat thoughtfully into the mud. "If you need a raft for your journey beyond the town, you're welcome to it. Save yourself the cost of buying new." Lee looked at the raft. It was serviceable, perhaps, but clearly worn and heavy with absorbed water. He had no immediate need for a raft beyond the town. His path lay on solid ground. But the ferryman's offer sparked a flicker of practicality. Why not? It might be useful later. Better than nothing. He thanked the ferryman, paid his coin, and boarded the sturdy wooden boat for the crossing. The river was wide and powerful. The ferryman, despite his age, handled the oars with practiced strength, navigating the current with ease. Lee watched the opposite bank draw nearer, the sounds and smells of the town growing distinct. He felt a mix of anticipation and the lingering calm from the mountain. Soon, they bumped against the town jetty. Lee disembarked, thanking the ferryman again. He then walked over to the old bamboo raft, hoisted it onto his shoulder. It was heavier than it looked, water seeping from its pores, and carried it away from the riverbank. Into the outskirts of the town, he found a quiet spot near a copse of trees, sheltered from the main thoroughfare, but within sight of the path leading onward. He set the raft down, the damp bamboo cool against the earth. He sat beside it, contemplating his next steps. He needed food, perhaps a night's shelter. The raft, he looked at it. It was cumbersome. He wouldn't need it for days, maybe weeks. Yet, discarding it felt wasteful, ungrateful even. "It might be useful if I encounter another river," he reasoned. "It's mine now. I should keep it. So, he decided to stay near the town for a day or two, resting and gathering supplies. With the raft as his temporary, slightly damp companion, he found work, helping unload a grain cart, earning a few more coins and a simple meal. He slept under the stars near his raft, The sounds of the town, a low hum in the distance. The next morning, feeling refreshed, Lee prepared to continue his journey. He hoisted the raft onto his shoulder again. It felt even heavier, the absorbed water making it sag. He walked along the path, leading away from the town, the raft bumping against his back, its dampness seeping through his robe. After only a short distance, he began to sweat. The path was dry and dusty, leading through fields and small groves. There was no river in sight, nor any sign of needing a raft anytime soon. The sun climbed higher, beating down. The raft became an increasing burden, awkward and unnecessary. He stopped by a small well where travelers rested. Setting the raft down with a sigh of relief, he splashed cool water on his face. An old woman drawing water looked at him, then at the raft, her eyes crinkling with amusement. "Planning a long swim, young man?" she asked, nodding towards the dry field stretching to the horizon. Lai managed a weak smile. "No, grandmother. It was given to me. After crossing the river, I thought it might be useful later." "Ah," she said, understanding dawning. "The ferryman's old raft. He's been trying to get rid of that waterlogged thing for months. Clever. Offering it to travelers heading inland." She chuckled softly. "A raft is for crossing rivers, young man, not for carrying on dry land. It's meant to be used for its purpose, and left behind when the crossing is done. Clinging to it just weighs you down." Her words struck Lei with the force of a physical blow. He stared at the raft, then at the dusty path stretching endlessly. Before him, the ferryman hadn't been offering a gift. He'd been offloading an encumbrance. And Lai, clinging to the idea of its potential future usefulness, to the notion that it was now his possession, had willingly shouldered the burden. He saw the parallel instantly. How many other rafts was he carrying? Old beliefs about himself? Grudges held on after their purpose had passed? Patterns of thinking that had served him once, but were now obsolete, heavy, and slowing his progress? The teachings from the mountain weren't meant to be carried like this waterlogged raft. They were tools for crossing specific rivers of the mind, to be used and then integrated, not clung to as external possessions. He thought of Master Huiming's words: "Carry them not as burdens but as lights. Lights illuminate the path. They aren't carried on the back." The raft wasn't a light. It was dead weight. Its purpose had been served the moment he stepped onto the far bank. A wave of understanding washed over him, cool and liberating. He walked over to the raft. It wasn't anger he felt towards it, but a profound sense of release. He dragged it away from the path towards a patch of scrubby bush near the well. He didn't need to destroy it. It had served its function. He simply needed to let it go, to leave it where it belonged, near the river it was meant to cross. He set it down gently, amidst the dry grasses. He patted its damp surface once, a silent acknowledgement and farewell. Then he turned his back on it. He adjusted his small pack, feeling immediately lighter, unburdened. The path ahead seemed clearer, the air fresher. He took a deep breath, tasting the dust and the sun, feeling the freedom of movement unencumbered. He looked back only once, not at the raft, but towards the distant river, shimmering in the heat haze. The ferryman, the crossing, the raft, they were part of the journey completed. His hands were empty now, ready to meet the new terrain, unburdened by the tools of the past crossing. He turned and walked on, his step lighter, carrying only the living wisdom within, not the dead weight of outgrown vessels. The path stretched before him, dry and open, leading towards the next river, whenever it might appear, and the next crossing, which would require its own raft, or perhaps a bridge, or simply the courage to swim.